The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Welcome to the debut offering of Skip Lockwood's podcast. I am thrilled to have Skip with me. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. A little nervous. Skip, how you doing?
You've got the pre-game jitters, Ralph.
Oh, I do indeed. I've been looking forward to this. You and I have had 4 guest appearances by you, Skip, you on 4 different shows that we've done, and you are such an orator and such a clear communicator, such a lover of baseball, that a while back I came to you and I said, how about doing this as a regular thing? And you agreed to give it a try, and my nervousness notwithstanding, let's get right to it. We talked about a number of things on the airwaves. We didn't really elaborate about how much I respect and how important it is that you made the major leagues as not only a star relief pitcher, but before that you came up as a position player. And I'd like to go back to your early years of playing ball when you were scouted, and I'm wondering if you were scouted as both a pitcher and a position player, because the A's signed you initially as a third baseman. And I want to hear it from the horse's mouth, Skip Lockwood.
I was very fortunate, Ralph. I played 3 sports in high school, basketball, baseball, and track. And this was early 1960s, and we didn't have a baseball field. We didn't have a track either. So we used to run in the parking lot. We used to run in the hallways of the school for our practices. Baseball, we used to go over to Old Kelly Field in Hyde Park and play at a field that was not cleaned up and not maintained very well at all. And all the players would go out with brooms and brushes and sweep and mop and try to make it playable so we could play our practices over there.
Now, this is in Boston, am I correct?
In this Boston area in 1961 and 62. We didn't know any better. It was fun. It's what we did.
What was your best sport?
Well, baseball was the best sport, but I could run pretty well. The reason I ran fast is that in the hallways where we practiced, we used to race down the hallways in the door frame, the door that was in front of the starting blocks for us, only would fit one person through it. So if you were running 2 abreast, you had to beat the guy that you were running with into the door frame. Otherwise, you couldn't get down the hallway.
So you had some motivation.
You had motivation to get in front of him. I was very fortunate. I got to play in the Hearst All-Star game in Boston and qualified to play in New York City as a third baseman, as an infielder, a snot-nosed kid. Went to New York.
I assume as a third baseman you had a strong arm, but were you pitching as well? Or I know pitching came later after you had reached the major leagues, but I'm wondering if there was a glimmer, a thought of going to the hill way back in those days.
No, not at all. I was committed at third base. I was playing infield. I hit a home run in the Polo Grounds when I was a sophomore. A home run, Ralph. And the scouts noticed, so you could almost hear them flipping through the books that they had to try to identify who was that kid that hit that home run.
Oh,
I
wow.
floated
How
around
old?
the bases on.
But how old were you? You were
I was
17,
probably
18?
15,
Oh,
16
wow.
years old. I floated around the bases. I remember,
I can well imagine.
trying to make sure I stepped in the middle of each base so I wouldn't miss them. But that brought the scouts out. So that's in high school. You're hidden from, because there was no draft back then. Everybody had to be scouted by the bird dogs and then the scouts from the various teams. And I was going to a all-boys Catholic high school near Boston. They would have never found me. Even if you played great. But the home run in the Polo Grounds put me on the map. So I got a chance to be scouted and signed as a third baseman. The interesting story I tell in my book, Inside Pitch, is that Pat Friday from the A's was the general manager of the A's, and he had flown to Boston. And Bill Enos, longtime scout with the A's, had scouted me for 2 or 3 years. But Pat Friday came in 3 days after I graduated from high school, and he wanted to sign me. And the offer was $35,000 in 1964.
Wow, back in those days, we're talking 60, 61, right?
Was 64.
64, maybe.
Yeah, that was a lot of money.
Before the draft.
Was a year before the draft. And I was lucky I got a chance to sign that contract and play with play with the A's. It was a team full of kids, but I wanted to play at third base. I had a good arm, hit with a little bit of power, and what I used to do, excuse me, every day is practice in front of the mirror. I used to watch myself swing. I'd be down in the basement, and I was visualizing, practicing what my swing looked like. And that picture, that visualization tool, I took with me when I went to be a position player with the A's. And
I wonder if that came from Ted Williams' book. I don't know if you read one of his original autobiographies. He talks about spending a lot of time, bat in hand, visualizing his swing in front of a mirror and looking at it. I just wonder, you being a Boston kid, growing up there, if that was in your mind, either consciously or subconsciously.
I used to love to watch Williams hit. He was an uppercutter, and I was trying to be a level swing guy. So it was a little bit different in terms of our approach, but what a clinic he would put on when he would swing the bat. I love to watch him swing.
Yeah, and fortunately, there are still some really good clips of his stance, of his swing on YouTube. If you search around a little bit, and it's wow, left-handed swing looks beautiful no matter what for some reason. But wow, Ted Williams. You watched him in Fenway when you were a kid.
I got to see him. I got to meet him when they had the 100th anniversary of Fenway, and they invited everybody back. I was privileged to get a chance to meet him briefly, very, very short period of time. But he was a guy that we always tried to copy. Every kid in the Boston area tried to copy that swing. Ted had great vision. He was a pilot, as you know, fought in the Korean War twice, and his vision was like 2015 or 2010.
Yeah, or 2010, something like that, really.
See this? Yeah, he was incredible vision.
Yeah. Would you tell me, Skip, about some of the players you came up with in Kansas City that a lot of whom formed the nucleus of that terrific run that they had from 72 to 74, and you could take it one year earlier and 1 year later. they had 5 pennant winners in a row. And I'd say 5 or 6 of those guys came up with you.
They had a bonus protection rule in those days where, for some reason, they were trying to discourage bonuses. And I got a pretty good bonus. So I was had to be protected on the 25, not the 40-man, the 25-man roster for the season, the 1965 season. And there was 5 or 6 of us that were on that team just because of that rule. Not because we had a major league experience or had proven ourselves in the minor leagues. But just let me run down the list of players that are on that team. First of all, Catfish Hunter was my roommate, and he was on that team. Hertford, North Carolina. He had a pretty good major league season, career in the big leagues.
Career, yes.
Oakland. And
you told an incredibly interesting story. I'll ask you to digress for a second and repeat it. It's worth retelling, if you would.
I have so many Catfish Hunter stories.
He came in limping one day.
First of all, Catfish was not his name. His name was James Hunter. Charlie Finley gave him the Catfish name, I believe, in a conversation before he signed. I'm not sure anybody in his high school called him Catfish. But he came to the big leagues out of high school. He showed up at the Manatee River Hotel in Winterball in 64, between 65, just before the 65 season. And as I told you in a story before, he was limping. And he said, knocked on the door, it's going to be my roommate. Opened the door, and hi, I'm Jim. We shake hands, and he comes limping into the room, and his sock was red, and his shoe, it looked like he was limping poorly. And I asked, Jim, what happened to your foot? And he said, well, I blew my little toe off in a hunting accident last week, and it hasn't healed, and I've been on my feet all day long. So he had, he didn't want Charlie Finley to know that he had blown his toe off.
And conversely,
the other funny thing about shaking hands with Catfish was that he had a little stub of a finger, like a sixth finger, on his right hand. It wasn't much of anything, but when you shook hands with him, it was like putting your hand in a popcorn box, shaking hands with Catfish. So he had 11 fingers and 9 toes the day I met him.
Right, and to the best of my knowledge, that's an American League record.
It might be a record. But he was a fisherman. Catfish loved to fish, and across from the hotel there was a train trestle that was perfect for any kind of fisherman to go out there, and you could throw your worms or whatever you were fishing with right in the bay was right there, and the train trestle was right next to the hotel. The second day that the Catfish was there, he said, I'm going to go out fishing. And so he went out, and he went up on those train trestles, and he was fishing, except that a train came by. So he was on the train trestle, like in the middle of it, and here comes, a local train with a bunch of cars going by. And the only thing he could do was to crawl underneath, down where the stanchions were and the pilings were for the train, and hang on as the train rattled over. And it must have taken 20 minutes
scared the crap out
for
of
the train to go by. But he came back to the hotel. He was ashen. He was so white. He was saying, Ruby, you can't believe what just happened. I was picking up the train came by. Man, I had to hang on. He was showing me how he was hanging on to the wood pilings underneath it.
At least he had the good sense to do that, for crying out loud.
I think it was either that or jump.
Which wouldn't have ended well. So that was a bad week for him. He had shot off his foot, shot off his toe, and
but you would never know. I mean, he was a guy that went out to the mound, whether he was sick or whether he was healthy, he would never ever turn the baseball down. And he would pitch a full game in 2 hours. We used to love to watch him pitch on Sunday because usually Sunday was our getaway day.
Right.
He'd go out there and pitch, and you'd be, in the locker room, on the plane, hours before the guys.
Nice memories. Tell me
there was
about
one of
his
the guys on that
competitive
team.
spirit and how that runs rampant through professional athletes. Tell me where that comes from, your competitive spirit, where it comes from, and his in particular, because hell, he's a Hall of Famer. You're talking about memories, first day memories in pro ball, that kind of thing, and he's on to the Hall of frickin' Fame. That's we're not just talking about Joe Schmo here. And I'd like to get some sort of a reason that you think contributed, something in him that you think contributed to his overall success.
Jim was a simple guy. He didn't like complicated things, kind of a meat and potatoes guy. And he wanted to throw strikes, and he wanted to start everybody off with strike one, whether it was a slider or a fastball. It wasn't complicated. And he took things very, very simply when he went to the mound. He would take one pitch at a time. He would take one inning at a time, and he would one batter at a time. He would make things very simple. And a competitive spirit, I think, is a momentum thing in sports. It builds, it cascades. When you start to get some success and you can build another batter on top of it, another inning on top of that success, you can feel the motion. You can feel the momentum coming. Jim was the kind of guy that if you let him get ahead of you and he's in the strike zone, he's going to get you out. You could feel it. You could feel his intensity. He wanted to work quickly. So when Jim was on the mound, I always felt like the batters were pressured because they had a bat in their hand, but Jim was coming at you already with a pitch. If you stepped into that box, Jim was going to throw a pitch. And so you'd see guys come in with one hand up, to the umpire signaling, whoa, don't let him throw it yet. I think the pressure that you could feel from Jim 60 feet, 6 inches away was his intensity, and he commanded that mound, and he was pressuring the batter. It was his strike zone. It was his game to win. And he knew that
now,
momentum was building up.
As a defensive player, tell me how much that helps you and your teammates to work behind a guy who you're not standing around and waiting for him to walk around the mound and to fiddle and futz with.
Oh, I think it had a great deal. First of all, you're gonna get some ground balls. He's gonna throw the ball, and so you're gonna see some ground balls. So everybody in the infield was on their toes and ready. I think you probably know that a lot of infielders will come forward and come up onto their toes as the ball is released from the pitcher. They don't stay back. They come up forwards and actually some players will even jump a little bit to get up on their toes. It was great to have Catfish out there because he was going to throw strikes. It was going to be a fast game. You knew you were going to get the play, a few ground balls or a fly ball or two in the outfield. And everybody likes that. Everybody likes that momentum, that feeling that this guy's going to keep us in the game.
Now, did you pattern, when years later you became a pitcher, did you pattern yourself after that type of thing where you wanted to keep the game going and keep momentum going, that sort of thing?
Well, you never saw me pitch, but I was a cantankerous cuss. I wanted to first of all, I wanted the batter to make eye contact with me. If at all possible, I want him to look at me. This was personal with me. I wasn't pitching to a catcher or to a strike zone. I was trying to get the batter out. It was personal. I wanted him to look at me. I wanted to make contact with him. I was communicating with him, or trying to communicate with him. So yes, absolutely. Catfish, the way he went about the mound, the way he went about his business on him. Every young boy coming up would emulate that. That's the way you wanted to pitch, that intensity, that focus. Now that you mention it, I think it's exactly what he did.
Well, that I'm glad I called it.
He did.
I got to ask you, coming up, you had Sal Bando, who ends up being the regular third baseman on those A's teams we talked about. Did he come up exactly the same time as you? Or were you there first?
No, I got there first. The guy that was playing with the A's at third base is a guy that I'd like to recognize tonight, actually, Ed Charles.
Yeah, just passed away. Future Met as well, and kind of the poet laureate of the Mets, and he will be missed by not just baseball, by the world, the glider.
Yeah, easy Ed Charles. He was an extraordinary guy. When I signed, I went to join the ball club for a couple of days. They were just showcasing me, and I was going to get a chance to take batting practice. I would suit for the games, couldn't play. I wasn't on the roster, but I'd sit in the dugout. Kind of a thrill for a 17-year-old kid.
For a kid, yeah. And you're traveling around the American League. What was it like to go back to Boston that first time in a uniform, a big league uniform?
Yeah, I was so in awe of it. It was a starchy woolen uniform. It didn't fit all that well. Starchy. It was, as you remember, the A's had odd-colored uniforms. They had white, and they had yellow, and they had green. And it was the raglan sleeves.
They like to call the yellow gold, but
yellow gold. And it was laying down white. I don't remember what the green was. Maybe it was money green. I don't know. But I was, but Ed had an impact on me right away. He was a guy that would come to you, and he would help you calm down. I was all excited. I was trying to hit every single pitch in batting practice over the fence, and I wanted to show them. I wanted to prove to them. I wanted them to get their money's worth, if you will. And of course, you can't do that. And you're making a fool out of yourself, trying to stand up there, 17-year-old kid trying to, jack every ball out of the ballpark. And he came to me. I had just arrived at the ballpark, and he would say, "Take it easy today. Easy does it. Hit a couple balls the other way. Try to hit the ball up the middle, And listen, Skip, when you throw the ball to first base, get it over there, but you don't need to gun it over there. You just need to get a good throw that the first baseman's going to catch." So I was rearing back from third base. I'd get a ground ball in batting practice, obviously, and I was letting it fly, the first base, but they were sailing in the stands, and they were going every way, and the Peter Bender.
Showing off your arm.
I was trying to show off. I was doing it too hard.
Now, what's nice about that story is that he was the regular third baseman, and you're coming up, presumably, to take his job, to offer competition, this, that, and the other thing. It so much impresses me. I can think of the shortstop with that trained Buddy Harrelson. Roy McMillan was such a tutor to Harrelson, and the fact that he was doing that Glider was doing that for you is terrific. I think that's a sign of a man's character.
First of all, he's an extraordinary guy. And he went on, as you said, to write some poetry, and he was very philanthropic in the community. He did a lot for everybody he met. Ed was the kind of guy that if he couldn't hold the position himself, if you came there to win the position, he'd give you some competition, but he would step out of the way. And he was, I remember in 1965, 2 or 3 times during the season, Ed would come to me before the game and he'd say, Skip, you're going to play today. I'm going to take it at bat, and if I get a hit, I might take 2, but most likely you're going to get a chance to play, starting in the 3rd inning. So, get yourself ready. You're going to get a chance to play because I'm going to come out. And that's what he would do. He'd start the game, he'd swing the bat the first up, and then he'd take himself out, and the manager would put me in. He was the kind of guy that used to do the shirt off his back. I couldn't imagine a guy being. And first, he came up from very humble beginning, and had to work his butt off to get to the big leagues. And he was a guy that wanted to help everybody, just because of the way he played. He was just so smooth, and the word elegant comes to mind when you think of Ed Charles.
Comes up as a poor Floridian kid portrayed in the movie 42. He's the kid that was chasing the train, that he had briefly befriended Jackie and had some interaction with the man who was to pave the way for him to make the majors. And so when you say a poor upbringing, you could put, a star by that, because abject poverty is what it was. And, boy, like I say, he will be missed, Ed Charles.
Yeah, I think he left school before high school. I think he was maybe in 8th grade, 7th grade. And I think he drifted around before he got into baseball. He might have even worked as a dishwasher for a year or so. He was humble. He was connected. He was elegance in motion. Ed Charles, there was a signature play that Ed Charles used to have. If you remember, they would hit you 4 or 5 balls, and you would throw them to first base. And we used to have batting practice, and then it was followed by infield practice. They don't do that anymore. But the infield was a chance for the players to field a couple balls and throw them to first and throw them to second. And then they would have a slower one. So it was so you could practice like a swinging bunt. So the third baseman would run in for the swinging bunt and scoop it down, pick it up with his bare hand, and Ed used to just fire a strike underhanded over, just as smooth as silk, and just fire this strike over to first base. Yeah,
nothing looks more athletic than a third baseman doing that, coming in for that excuse me bunt is how it generally happens. And as a pitcher, you got to go, wow, that puts life into a ball club. It's little plays that turn around the game, or they're not little plays. They end up being big plays because it changes the feel. It changes the team momentum. Am I correct about that?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, if you throw it away, it's going to be a double or a triple. And back then, at least in Municipal Stadium, Kansas City, we played on a grass infield. Not every team had grass infield, but most of the teams had grass infield. It wasn't like the AstroTurf. You didn't get a clean bounce. The bounce would hit and stop. The ball would hit and go to the right or to the left. So when you were coming in, when Ed Charles was gliding in, the glider, he was measuring this thing. And it's not, I don't know whether you tried to do it, to pick up that baseball and then in the same motion, throw it over there. You'd have to anticipate a little bit that you were going to pick it up. And then when you'd let it go to first base, that was just a smooth one motion. And if you don't get him out at first base, he's going to end up at second anyway. And now there's probably nobody covering third base. So, you're throwing a double or a triple. It was never a play that I had in my bag. I tried it over and over again, and it was never my signature play, believe me.
Okay, but at least you got to play with a guy whose signature play it was. So something to be said for just being in good company. How about that? Would you tell me about the transition from being a position player, how that came about? We touched upon it on one of your appearances. Whose idea was it? Who came to whom? And who helped you initially?
It was, my career was over. I had served some time in the Army Reserves. I had come back from the Army Reserves, and I was in the low minor leagues trying to fight my way back. You mentioned a guy that had gotten himself signed and was the starting third baseman. His name was Sal Bando. And Sal was younger than I was. He was in the big leagues. He's a great player, right-handed hitting, good fielder. And I'm in the low minor leagues trying to battle back from, I was very shy about the curveball, let me say. I couldn't hit it very well, and I was guessing fastball every pitch. I was getting curveball at least every other pitch. It was not going well. And when I got a phone call from Charlie Finley, the phone rang, and was on the road trip. The phone rang, and it looked like a snake that was buzzing on the top of the desk, and I picked it up like that. He said to me, I'm here, you're having trouble seeing the ball and hitting the curveball. And I said, Charlie, that's absolutely true, and I'm sorry, I'm trying so hard to be a great third baseman, infielder. And he said, I know you are, I know you're trying hard, but he says you can't try that hard and be successful hitting. It's got to come naturally. He said, I've got an idea. And I really thought the phone call was to give me a ticket home. But the idea he had was, he said, you've got a good arm. They tell me you can throw like nobody else, from third base at least. He said, I'd like to give you a chance to continue in uniform, which meant a paycheck to me, and to go and try to become a pitcher. He said, I'm going to send you the special camp in Florida with my minor league pitching coach, Bill Posdell, and he's going to teach you how to wind up and how to throw strikes. We're going to work on a little breaking ball for you. And he said, I'm hoping that you can come back to the big leagues as a pitcher. But he said, right now, he says, you're not going to play infield for my team anymore. What do you say? Are you willing to make that transition? So I guess it was my to say yes or no, but I said absolutely. If you
had it occurred to you before? Would have you asked him or gone? If it didn't occur to him, would have it occurred to you?
Everybody had a suspicion that, and I could throw very well. I had a good arm. The ball would rise as it left my arm going, from third base to first. I had a lot of life to it, a lot of carry to it. I was interested in pitching. I had pitched batting practice that was hilarious, me pitching batting practice, because nobody wanted to come up. Because here's me trying too hard again,
Right.
But I had tried batting practice, but I had never pitched in a game, in a professional game. I had pitched a couple in high school, but it didn't take long. The thing that you've got to learn that may not be obvious is you've got to learn the rubber. Just I didn't know which side of the rubber to stand on. And today in the big leagues, if you notice, a lot of pitchers pitch from the opposite side that I would. So the right-handed pitcher pitching from the first base side of the rubber, or lefty from the third base side of the rubber. I saw Posdell says, I want you to go to the third base side of the rubber, put your toe in here. And he was the guy that really helped me figure out, do I step all the way back straight? Do I step sideways? Do I wind up? Do I consider everything from the stretch position? It was Bill and I working out.
You had the disadvantage of having to learn this as a pro, whereas had you come up a pitcher in American Legion and Sandlot, a lot of these things would have been second nature by this time in your career. Am I correct?
Yes, it would have been easier. It was something I had to do.
Okay, so I'm commending you on overcoming yet another hurdle from that standpoint.
And I didn't know whether I should. One thing I didn't know is whether to step straight back. So a lot of, like in Little League, they teach you where you step straight back and straight forwards. And so I tried doing that, and I wasn't very consistent. So it was, Posdell and I would say, okay, well, don't struggle with that. Step where you want to step. Step like sideways, and then kind of glide into the pitching motion. So the stepping and the trying to get consistent with your landing leg and finding that sweet spot where the every time you land, the left leg would land in the same spot. And he would watch me. And he would say, okay, you're a little bit open that time. I can see because I can see your foot. You landed over here. And you were a little closed that time. So the footwork on the mound wasn't intuitive to me. It was something that I had to learn. And the thing that happened is you find the strike zone if you have good footwork. If you're a little awkward out there or are clumsy, the strike zone moves around and you can't find it. But if you start with good mechanics and command of your motion, get your left foot into that same spot every time, the strike zone calms down and you can find it a little bit better.
Does that transcend to tennis? Have you played tennis at all? And is the pitching motion somewhat like a serve, or am I imagining that just being an amateur tennis player that I am?
I think it does. It's sort of the same motion. It's a lot different arm configuration because you're trying to put topspin on it. And of course, in pitching, you're not. You're trying to spin the baseball as hard as you can. I think there's an equivalency to serve in tennis versus the pitching motion. But the other thing, just if I can dive a little deeper into the things that I had to learn, was how to hold the baseball and how to pinch the baseball. It was easy to grab the seams, along the seams, and when you grab it along the seams, that's a sinker ball motion. And I wasn't throwing like a sinker ball. I was throwing it like with cross seams. So I had to learn how to be either a cross seam pitcher or a sinker ball pitcher. And the second thing was how to pinch it out. So you don't just let it go and let it slide off your top fingers. I actually pinched it. So my top nails used to come down and actually cut my thumb, cut into the top of my thumb because I was pinching my hand so tight when I throw the baseball. So not everybody knows it's also the throwing motion that gives you velocity, but your hand strength, the pinching motion that you get on the fastball at least, that helps you get that life to it.
Now, did you have to build that up when you became a pitcher? Is that something that just came naturally to you, the pinching motion, I mean?
It was. I talked to pitchers about it, and they tell me the same thing. Is When the catcher throws the ball back to the pitcher a lot of times will take their glove off, and put it under their arm, and they'll rub the baseball up.
Right.
And so, not everybody knows what they're thinking or what they're doing. When I used to rub the baseball up, I tried to make the seams move. I tried to make the seams change direction if I could. I was pinching that baseball with both of my hands so hard and so tight. I was trying to make the leather move. So when I was rubbing the baseball up, the catcher would throw it back to me. I was thinking about that baseball, and I was going to control it, and the seams belonged to the end of my fingers. I was visualizing how the ball in my hand would release the pitch in visualizing that pinching motion. As you can tell, everything mattered to me when I played.
I have learned so much by that, because when I watch a ball game and I see a pitcher doing that, I think he's just trying to quiet his head down, just a ritualistic thing. No, the intensity starts with way before you actually take the mound to throw the pitch. I didn't realize there was any intensity at that point. I thought the intensity didn't come until you walked up the hill, or
it's what you command. The pitcher is trying to take control over as many things as he possibly can. You're 60 feet 6 inches away from the plate. There's a territory, grass or dirt between you and the batter. I want to control that piece of real estate. It starts by me having a sensitivity and command and mastery of that baseball. And the way you get it is you hold it and you pinch it and you own it. And you see pitchers, they pan the dugout, and inevitably you'll see pitchers in the dugout sitting with a baseball in their hand. And they're turning a curveball over in their hand, or they're visualizing a fastball just as if they were pitching. Well, when you're on the mound and you've got a baseball, you want to own that baseball. You want to own the territory between home and the pitching mound. That's your territory.
Skip, we have an announcer, an analyst with the Giants out here in Northern California. His name is Mike Krukow. And Mike Krukow, when he announces the game, he's got the ball in his hand, just the way you describe. You say, he's been out of the game, not pitching, for like 30 years now, and he can't get through a game without having the ball in his hand, and that intensity doesn't go away. So I must ask you, and I think I've touched on it, how does it end? How does the competitive spirit get turned around the first year you're retired? The wheels are spinning, and you're in neutral. And I just want to hear, because you put intensity into rubbing up the baseball, where I'm thinking, isn't this a beautiful way to watch a ball game? He's rubbing it in between. I know what you mean. He puts the strap in his hand, so the glove is hanging. Some guys put the glove under their arm.
Right.
But I never saw it as an intense moment. So if you got intensity from that, how did that first year go for you?
It wasn't pretty. There's so much intensity to the game that people don't see. The transition is difficult for every player. There's a financial transition, there's an emotional transition, psychological transition, there's social transition. Your position within the community changes. What's inside of your head is, I want to control the things I possibly can. As a baseball player, I tried desperately to control my environment. I had rituals. I had my favorite socks. I had a certain way that I would put on the uniform. Well, believe it or not, buttoning my shoes, tightening my shoes meant something to me. Every button on the uniform, when I would close it, meant something to me. When I was a closer with the Mets, every time I'd take a button and close it, I was saying to myself, "You're going to close. You're closing this." I would sometimes say that out loud. People would think I was a little crazy. Putting the hat on.
We spoke of Ted Williams. He used to talk out loud about himself as well in batting practice. I'm the greatest ball player. I'm Teddy effing Williams, blah, blah, blah. So I know a lot of similarities from that standpoint. You were getting your game face on. Could people talk to you before a game?
They could. I wasn't going to listen. I don't know whether we've talked about this before, but before the game, I prepared the game in my mind. I visualized the game before I went out there. I visualized what I was going to do, how I was going to do it. I would play that movie of me pitching. If there was a mirror around, I would pitch in front of the mirror. But most of the time, I would elevate my feet on my stool in front of my locker and have my bottom on the ground, on the carpet, my legs elevated, fully dressed. I've got my hat on, I've got my spikes on, and I've got my glove on, and I've got a baseball in my hand. And what I was doing is I was running the tape. I was running the movie of me being the closer and how that was going to work. I would picture Jerry Glody's glove popping, with the fastball. And you could see a little smoke come out from the glove, and you could hear that pop. Everything I did when I went to the ballpark, and often before that, was building up to crescendo when I would come into the game. Retirement meant I didn't have any of that. And it was hard to replace it, but what I wanted to do was be the best father I could possibly be, and community member. And as you know, I went to school, so I replaced a lot of the intensity and the mastery.
You didn't just go to school. You went to Columbia, Ivy League, and then you went to MIT. So you got schools. You're, to say the least, an overachiever in life. Have you been called that?
I have been called that.
Okay.
If I mow the grass, I mow the grass hard, Ralph. Everything even I mow it,
Skip, what a terrific introduction. Can't end it without having the audience and myself find out how you came to be Skip.
Skip was a nickname I always had. I don't know that I didn't know myself before I was Skip. I was always Skip. My mother still calls me Skipper. My given name is for my father. He was Claude Edward Lockwood. I was given Claude as an honorary name, Claude Edward as a secondary name. I had big ears, and I wore very thick glasses. Being Claude in elementary school, thick glasses and big ears was not cool, believe me. So I was happy to have the name Skip and Skipper. Skip mostly.
Well, I wonder how you would have gone with Skip to Kaczynski. How you wondering how Tycho was to Kaczynski, and I can see as a kid I just put myself back. Any little thing that makes one different as a kid, they don't want to know from it. All they want is conformity as at that age. And yeah, now I see Skip's nice and easy. You still honor your dad. You keep the name. I mean, that's your name.
I did. I honor my father. He was a wonderful, magnanimous, simple, proud guy. White shirt, half sleeves with a pocket protector. He was an interesting guy who would come to the practices in high school. When I played in the pros, he was always around. He was just a fascinating, really role model for everything.
We've paid homage to him. Can you pay homage to one youth coach that you had that set this all into process? Could have been high school, could have been American Legion. Who set this going?
I cut my arm when I was 6 or 7, bad enough that there was possibility of some deformity. My father refused to have me live with any kind of physical affliction. He bought 2 baseball gloves, a catcher's mitt and a fielder's glove. I think the catcher's mitt must have been on sale, and a couple of baseballs. When I would come back from that injury, he would come home from work, and we would stand. He would squat in the front lawn of our house in Norwood, Massachusetts, and I would pitch to him. And he would move the glove around. He would say, "Hit the glove. Okay, over here, hit the glove." We were probably only 30 feet apart, but as a 5-year-old, my arm got stronger. As a 6-year-old, it was even stronger. I never had a coach that was any better than the time that I spent with my dad. He was a guy that was always positive, never critical, sarcastic about different things, always with you with his hand around your shoulder. He was a role model for everything. So the coach that really made it happen for me was my father.
Well, I don't have any better way to end this first podcast for you, Skip. That let's just let all that sink in for the time being out there. And thank you.
Thank you.
The Comfortably Zoned Radio Network is a better place to be with you here, Skip Lockwood. And, by the way, the name of the show, it's not just Skip Lockwood's podcast. I was nervous from the service. Inside Pitch with Skip Lockwood. How about that? We'll be back next week, same time, same place. Are you for it, Skip?
Thank you very much. I'll see you then.
All right. Adios, everybody. Be well. Thanks for listening.